What's up guys, Joey here at schoolofmotion.com and welcome to day 5 of 30 days of After Effects. Today we have a very cool topic, but before I get into that, let me just say thank you very quickly to the Department of Motion Design at the Ringling College of Art and Design, the sponsors of 30 days of After Effects. Without them, it would not be possible to do 30 videos in a row like this. And one of the coolest things about Ringling is that they don't just teach you After Effects or Cinema 4D, they teach you traditional animation, stop motion, illustration, 2D animation, 3D animation, experimental animation, and all of those things they combine, they make you a very dangerous motion designer. Speaking of experimental, that is sort of the topic we're talking about today. We're going to talk about how to get MIDI information into After Effects and create animation from that. If you don't know what MIDI is, I'll explain that a little bit. And we're going to be sort of in and out of After Effects today because we're going to have to use another program, Logic to be specific, to actually create the MIDI information. So hopefully this is really interesting and gives you some cool ideas about some unique ways to use After Effects. All right, so let's check it out. So let's start out this first video by doing a quick primer on what MIDI is, for those of you that don't have any experience with it. And for those of you that do, you know, who knows, maybe you'll learn something. So this app that I'm in right here is called Logic, and there's a lot of different programs out there that you can work, you know, with audio, and you got Pro Tools, Logic, Cubase, Sonar. I mean, there's a lot. If you have a Mac, it comes with GarageBand, which can do MIDI. I just like to use Logic. So first, let me just kind of show you what MIDI is, right? If I hit play, it just sounds like bad 80s music. So what MIDI is, it's a way of storing musical information, okay? So this song, and I just downloaded this off of a free MIDI site, it's got 6 instruments here, and each instrument has its own track, and if I click on each one, you can see that there are notes assigned to each one. So, you know, when you go into a recording studio, typically you have microphones and you record the audio, and once it's recorded, you know, you can edit it and do things to it, but typically that's what you got. Whatever you played, that's what you get. With MIDI, it doesn't work that way. So with this track selected, I'm just gonna hit play, and you can hear what it's doing, and you'll be able to see exactly what all these notes mean. So, you know, when you go to a recording studio and you play a piano in front of a microphone, you've recorded an actual audio file. But when you record MIDI, all you're recording is the information about when you hit each key on the keyboard, how hard you hit the key, and it records just a bunch of data. And what's great about that is then you can change it. So if I take these 2 notes, I can move them around, right? And I've made the song even worse than it already is. So that's how MIDI works, and you can see that it kind of works on a grid system, right? And this is great if you're, you know, if you don't actually know how to play an instrument, you can still kind of make music, you know, really simply. You know, just sort of let's get rid of some notes here. You can just sort of, you know, program in whatever you want, just by adding notes. You know, there's a note. Right, and so that's how MIDI works. Now, you know, if you actually play piano, if you have a keyboard, you can really easily record your own MIDI information. And you know, as an animator, this was intriguing to me because, you know, especially when you're doing animations that have to be timed out to music, or you want things to sync up to a beat or something like that, it can be very tedious. And there's some ways to do it in After Effects that, you know, there's plugins that can kind of try to, you know, figure out when the kick drum's being hit and when the snare drum's being hit, and kind of read the audio file. But if you could actually get this information into After Effects, that would be super useful. So first thing I want to do is I want to show you guys how I got some MIDI information that I thought would be useful. And so I play drums. So I use an interface called an Octopad. And I'll link to a little bit more information about that if any of you guys play drums, you're curious about it. So what I have here is I have a track, and I've got a plugin that I use when I actually play drums in Logic. called Superior Drummer. It's this really cool plugin that works for a lot of programs, and it lets you use MIDI to control this very realistic, drum set sound, right? Right. So I sort of I have that set up, and now I'm gonna walk over and I'm gonna sit down on the Octopad, and I'm just gonna hit record. Cool, so that shows you exactly sort of how MIDI works. As I'm playing the drums, Logic is just recording basically on each little track here exactly what I played. And the different colors are just showing you different velocities, right? So okay, so you can you can see that the red hits are the strongest ones and the green are the weaker ones. And what's really great, especially if you're a drummer, is you can select all these notes and you can fix them real quick. And so now everything's gonna be perfectly in time. Now the ending's not in time, but what are you gonna do? So anyway, so there's our MIDI information, okay? And what I want to do is, I want to be able to use this in a way that's useful in After Effects, okay? So I'm gonna re-record something, and I'm gonna make something very, very simple. Then I'm gonna show you how to get that into After Effects, and I'm gonna show you sort of the basics of how to start working with that information. In part 2 of this tutorial, I'm gonna get into some pretty crazy expressions which will let you really, really control stuff. So let me hop back over to the kit and I'll just do something really, really simple. Cool, so that was much simpler, and this is gonna be easier to work with in After Effects, so let's just make sure that it sounds the way we want. Great, okay. And what I'm looking for here, I want a little bit more variation in the dynamics of the playing, right? And you can see a lot of these hits are red, but you've got a few of them in there that are different colors. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna select some of these, and I'm just going to change the velocity of them, which is gonna make them a little bit different. This will make it a little bit easier to see what's going on in After Effects. So. All right, maybe I'll make these two a little softer too. See, this is what's great about MIDI, especially if you're a musician. You really can just tweak the crap out of this stuff, right? Maybe I'll make these two a little softer. There we go. This one can be a little softer. Cool, and then we'll make these a little bit softer too, so it's more of a build up at the end. There we go. There we go. Cool. All right. So first thing we need to do is export an audio file of this. All right, and I'll show you how to do it in Logic. In GarageBand, it's gonna be a slightly different setup. But all you need to do is, use the internet and figure out how you export an audio file out of your digital audio workstation program. All right, so I'm gonna just select this region, and I'm going to bounce this track, and we are gonna call this, let me make a new folder here, and we'll call this demo, and this is gonna be my Tom's audio. Cool. All right, now you guys probably saw that I trimmed this little layer. There was kind of some extra stuff at the beginning that I didn't need, and so I trimmed it so it was just the part of the audio that I needed, okay? And so if I just export this as is from Logic, what I found is that it actually exports even the notes that I thought I erased. So what I need to first do is come down here, and in my edit menu just say delete MIDI events outside the region boundaries. And again, this is how Logic works, and I'm on the newest version of Logic. But if you, you know, if you're using Pro Tools or something, you just need to look up exactly how to do that. All right, and then we're just gonna go File, Export, Selection as MIDI file, okay? And actually, this error message is what I was hoping wouldn't happen. It's saying there are some events before position 1111. So it's actually saying that there are MIDI events that it's sensing that are happening before the beginning of the song. And actually, if I zoom in here, I think I see what it's doing. You see how this first hit is actually a little bit before the beat? There we go. I just moved it. And let's see if I try to export this now, if it works. Export, selection as MIDI file. There we go. And we're gonna call this demo Tom's audio MIDI. There we go. Now we have a MIDI file. So now let's hop into After Effects and let's talk about how to actually get this information into After Effects. I lied. We're not in After Effects. We're actually in a web browser. And why is that? Well, there's not a built-in way in After Effects to get MIDI information in. You have to use a plugin, and this is the only one I found, and it works great. I've actually mentioned this site in another one of these 30 Days of After Effects tutorials. This guy has made a bunch of sort of free plugins and scripts, and one of them is a MIDI importer, all right? And so you go to his website and you download it. It's a script, so you need to follow the instructions to actually install it in the right place. And then once you install it, it shows up in After Effects in your window menu right here, OM_MIDI, and here it is, okay? So first thing I need to do is import that TomTom audio. All right, so let's go into the demo folder. Let's grab the Tom's audio. Let's throw it down there. And let's just preview that real quick. Great, there it is, works perfectly, right? And so like your typical, you know, workflow to sync things to this would be maybe open up the audio waveform, which if you guys don't know this, you double tap L on an audio layer, it brings up the waveform, and maybe adding some markers, you know, wherever there's a hit. But now that we have the MIDI, we have a much more powerful tool. So let's import the MIDI. So what we're gonna do is make sure that our OM_MIDI script is open, and we're gonna click on this little tiny icon there, and this is where we tell it which MIDI file. So navigate to the folder, there's the MIDI file, hit OK. Now this script, right, it's not like a professional thing that you buy, and so sometimes it's a little bit finicky, okay? So I found that what works best is to make sure you have the correct comp open and select some layer in there, okay? It just sort of helps tell this script that this is the comp I want you to put the MIDI information into. And when you hit apply, it should work. There we go. All right, now here's what it did. It created a null, and I usually just immediately rename that null MIDI. And you can see that it's put a bunch of effects on here. Now the effect that it put on there is actually my good buddy, the expression slider. And it's renamed them channel 0, channel 0, channel 0, channel 9, channel 9, channel 9. And if I click on this null and I hit U, let's take a look at what we got. We've got a bunch of keyframes in there, okay? Now watch, I'm gonna play the audio and I want you to watch this playhead. Isn't that cool? These keyframes line up to the audio. Now, we need to know how to interpret them, okay? And here's one of the issues that I have found with this, okay? And I'm not sure if there's a workaround, and if someone figures this out, please tell me. But we work in video, we work in frames, okay? And this comp, for example, is 24 frames a second. But if you listen to the tom hits at the end, right, they're happening pretty quickly. And if I go back to Logic, right, and I zoom out so we can really see all my hits, you can see that there's basically 9 hits here, right? if we come into After Effects and we look at the very last little bit here, you know, there's how many? There's 3, 4, 5. I can't tell. That kind of looks like there might be 2 in there, kind of snuck in. And what happens is the plugin actually tries to put the notes on individual frames for you. Or sometimes it just gets kind of screwed up. You see how there's like 2 notes right next to each other? So when you play quickly, when notes are very close together, this script, it doesn't do a great job of putting things exactly where they should be. Now, for most cases, it's close enough. And in the way that I used it in the demo with, you know, the most amazing song ever written, Africa, I deliberately kept my playing pretty simple, knowing that this is how it's going to get used, okay? But here, let's just play this one more time. All right, and if you listen to the beginning, there's 3 hits right in a row, and we're seeing here's 3 keyframes, but then here's 6 keyframes, okay? So, and then over here we've got this channel 0 velocity that has nothing in it, okay? So the first thing I like to do is clean up the MIDI information a little bit, and this channel 0 has nothing on it. So I'm gonna delete all 3 of these channel 0s that it's given me. So now all I have is channel 9. Now, in MIDI, there's a lot of different things that can be measured. So obviously the timing when I actually hit the drum is measured, but also how hard I hit the drum is measured, right? That's the velocity. And if I click on this and I go into my graph editor, you can actually see right? You can actually see that the velocity matches up perfectly to my audio. Now the pitch on this isn't going to change because I'm playing one drum. If you had a piano instrument though, then you would have this. You'd have the same 3 kind of channels, right? You'd have the duration, and the duration of a drum hit is generally just kind of an instantaneous thing, right? So that's why when I click this, there's not a lot going on here. The velocity is changing, but when you're playing a piano, you actually might hold a note for a second and then let go. And so this will actually have more information in it for a piano than it does for a drum. You'll also have velocity information, and then you'll also have pitch information for the piano or for any instrument that has notes. This chart will move up and down and kind of tell you the pitch of the instrument, which you could do some cool stuff with too. But for now, let's keep it kind of simple. The drum doesn't have a pitch, so I'm also going to delete that. So now, you know, the way that this kind of works is whenever I hit a drum and it lands kind of on a frame, I get a keyframe on the duration. Right, now here's our first problem with the duration. You can see there's 4 keyframes. There's actually 5 hits, okay? And it's not, it sort of didn't register the first one or something, right? But on velocity, it did register all of them, okay? And what happens with velocity is it puts an extra keyframe at the end, okay? And that extra keyframe kind of levels it back out, okay? See that? So you can delete that, or you can just ignore it. You know, you could go through and just sort of delete each of these keyframes if you didn't want to use that. But you know, until you actually start using the data, you're not really sure how it's going to work. So, you know, just for this example, let's just leave this as is, and let's start doing something. Okay, so here's a quick and easy thing, and just so you guys know, you're gonna have to use expressions to do this. There's no other way to really make this work. And you know, again, if you've watched any of my After Effects tutorials, you know I love expressions. It's kind of my thing, and so you know I want you guys to kind of get more comfortable with them. So all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make a little circle here, and I'm just gonna tie the scale of the circle to this, okay? So let's look at the velocity here. So the highest it gets is 127, okay? So and it's interesting, so if I go here, if I go forward 1 frame, you can see that the value is 127, okay? The reason that number is 127 is because that's just the scale that MIDI works at. If we go back into Logic and take a look at this, let me open up this little guy down here. I'm gonna change this graph to note velocity, and so now you can see with all of the notes that there's kind of a corresponding dip in this velocity. If I hold my mouse over this note, it says velocity 127. If I hold it over this note, velocity 80, right? Right? So this is the information that's going back into After Effects. So that's the maximum, 127, and the minimum is 0, right? If I'm not hitting anything, then the velocity is 0. So what I want to do is I want to put an expression on the scale of this circle, okay? So what I want the scale to do is to look at this velocity slider, and I want it to scale from 100% when I'm not hitting the drum, maybe up to 200% when I'm hitting it as hard as I can. And when I'm hitting it in between, I want it to be somewhere in the middle. So the way we do that is we first need to set up a variable just to make this easier to read. So the value I want this expression to look at is this slider, channel 9 velocity. So I'm just gonna make a quick variable, val equals, val is just short for value, equals this. We always have to add a semicolon at the end, okay? And then I'm gonna use the linear expression. Linear expression in After Effects is awesome. It lets you take one number that's changing over time and map it to a different number over time, okay? So if you had a value, for example, the velocity of a MIDI note going from 0 to 127, but I want to map the scale of this circle to go from 100 to 200, that's exactly what linear does. And the way it works is you type in linear, in parentheses, you have to give it 5 arguments. The first one is what value am I looking at? Well, we're looking at that variable we just made called val. Then the next 2 arguments are the minimum and the maximum number that is expected to come out of this thing you're measuring, okay? So we know the minimum is 0 and the maximum is 127. Then the next 2 numbers are what are we going to map to these 2 numbers, okay? So when this value is 0, what should the result be? Well, when I'm not hitting a drum, I want the scale to remain at 100. So I'm just gonna type in 100. And when I'm hitting the drum as hard as I can, I want it to go up to 200. And that's it. Okay? Oh boy, we've got an error. Yes, here we go. The error message was telling me that this expression won't work because, and I'm glad you guys saw that because, you see, even when you use expressions all the time, you still screw them up every time. So scale is expecting an X and a Y number, and I am only returning one number here. So I'm actually gonna say this, S equals linear. So now I'm setting up one more variable, S, which is going to store the value that comes out of that linear expression. And now I can return, instead of one number, I can return an X and a Y. All right, and the way you do that is with opening bracket, and then the first number, S, comma, the second number, S, close the brackets. Okay, so all I'm doing is I'm telling After Effects I want this X number and this Y number to be the same. Both of the numbers will come from this expression here, okay? And if you are very unfamiliar with expressions, maybe you should watch the Intro to Expressions in After Effects video. All right, so now this expression should work, okay? So now let's do a quick RAM preview. So let me set this to half so it goes a little quicker. Great, okay? And let's make this number a little bit bigger too. Let's make this like 500, and then let's make this number 50 so we can get a lot more kind of variation out of it. So that's kind of it in a nutshell, how to get MIDI information into After Effects and how to begin using it. I want to show you guys one other thing I ran into while I was kind of preparing for this, and I'm not exactly sure why, but it'd be might be useful for you guys to know about this. I recorded a different piece of audio here. Let me grab it. It's this piece of audio, which is just let me hit LL here. Right, so this is a snare drum, kind of just solo piece here, right? All right, and what's different about this, you know, from the tom thing I did is I'm playing a lot faster, right? Like there's just a lot more notes to it. This is also longer. This is about 22 seconds here. And here's what happened when I imported the MIDI information. Okay, so that MIDI information is here. Okay, snare 2. And then let me hit apply. It brings it in. And what I noticed was I got MIDI information that went way out past my my actual audio file, and I thought that was weird. And so here, let me delete this channel that has nothing on it and the pitch channel, which we don't need. And let's look at the velocity channel. Okay, and let's zoom in a little bit here. And you notice right away that it doesn't seem to be matching up to the audio at all, and I thought that's really strange, and I didn't really understand why there was so many extra keyframes here. So what I did was I moved this layer over, and I'm just gonna I'm gonna basically click on this slider and then hold shift and click on this just to select every keyframe. And then while I'm holding option, I'm gonna grab the very last keyframe and move it to the left. And what I'm doing is I'm scaling all of these keyframes. And so what I wanna do is try to line up this last keyframe with this last snare hit right here, okay? So I'm basically just going in, and if you go into the graph editor and you select both of these, so you go to the graph editor, tap this twice, then hold shift and tap this and it will select everything. And if you have this little button check, the transform box, you can actually scale them and scale them in between frames so you can really line that last little hit up. So all I've done is I've taken my MIDI keyframes and scaled them. And here, now let's play this. So you can see now it lines up perfectly, and I actually did check it, and it lines up all the way through to the end. So if you have a ton of MIDI notes and it's a longer piece, just know you may have to scale the keyframes, okay? And this is pretty great. This shows you exactly why using MIDI information can be so useful, because look how many keyframes there are and how much information is here. And if you had to hand keyframe that, it would just suck. So this is a way better way to do it. You know, and then just out of curiosity, why don't I copy this circle here, and I'll just paste it into this, and we can see exactly how it reacts to this piece of audio. Okay, so I'm just gonna double tap U to bring up everything I've changed on my circle layer, and this will bring up this expression. And you know, here's something that's kind of cool. Because I named my null MIDI, and in the expression, that's actually what it was looking for. It was looking for a layer named MIDI. It just worked, and I don't have to change anything. So let's do a quick RAM preview here and just kind of play a little bit of this. So you can see that it's working. Now obviously it's very jerky. And it's not super useful yet. I mean, if you just wanted something really kind of flickery and cool, and maybe you just wanted a layer to turn on and off instantly in time with music, you can do a very simple expression like this and get that to work. If you want to have things be triggered and trigger particles and things like that, then it's a little more tricky. So in the next tutorial, that's what we're gonna get into. So hopefully this was a good kind of foundation, a good base of knowledge. So when we get into the more advanced stuff, it'll make a little bit more sense. So thank you guys, as always. I'll see you guys on the next episode of 30 Days of After Effects, which will be part 2 of this tutorial. And if you like this, if you found it useful, if you're excited about it, please share the tutorial on Facebook, on Twitter, email your friends, make sure you're signed up for our mailing list. The more support we get, the easier it is to do awesome things like this. 30 days in a row of tutorials. So thank you guys as always, and I'll see you next time. Thank you guys so much for watching, and stay tuned for part 2 of this tutorial, where we'll actually get really deep in the woods with expressions to make this stuff all work. the way we want it to. One more time, thank you to the Department of Motion Design at the Ringling College of Art and Design, the sponsors of this. If you haven't already, check out the contest they're sponsoring, because there are some amazing prizes you can win, some really cool opportunities you can get by entering the contest. And definitely, if you're not on the mailing list, please join the School of Motion mailing list so I can keep you updated easily on what's going on, new things I'm working on, and new tutorials that come out. So thank you guys so much. I'll see you next time.